In January 1909, an impossible threat moved through southern New Jersey, forcing entire towns to shut down completely. The morning after a heavy snowfall, residents discovered bizarre, hoof-shaped tracks running in an unbroken line. These prints marched straight over tall fences, climbed up exterior walls, and crossed rooftops, indicating that whatever made them had never touched the ground between steps. Soon, the physical evidence escalated into active encounters. In Bristol, Pennsylvania, a police officer named James Sackville drew his weapon and fired directly at a winged creature flying over a canal. The beast let out a piercing scream, absorbed the gunfire, and kept flying. The terror quickly spilled into everyday commutes. Witnesses in neighboring towns reported flying shapes swooping down from the sky, aggressively buzzing and attempting to attack open-air trolley cars packed with terrified passengers. By midweek, reports had flooded in from over 1,000 witnesses. The situation grew so intense that the Philadelphia Zoo publicly offered a staggering $10,000 reward for the beast's capture, dead or alive. Schools locked their doors. Mill workers refused to walk home after dark, and factories suspended operations rather than risk the commute. An entire industrialized region had paralyzed itself out of genuine fear of a literal monster. How a rational 20th century society succumbs to a medieval-style panic is a matter of historical record. To find the source of the hysteria, we have to rewind the clock over 250 years and travel deep into the dense, uncharted wilderness of the Pine Barrens. The foundation for that week of terror traces back to a bitter colonial-era political rivalry connecting this isolated forest to the publishing hub of Philadelphia. To dissect the anatomy of this mass panic, we must first deconstruct America's oldest unsolved legend. The most widely told campfire version begins in 1735, centering on an exhausted, overwhelmed woman known as Mother Leeds, living deep within the isolated stretch of the Pine Barrens. Pregnant with her 13th child and enduring a violent thunderstorm, she reportedly cried out in frustration, cursing her own unborn baby to be a devil. The newborn instantly mutated, growing hooves and bat wings before attacking the midwives and escaping up the chimney. For the next century and a half, the story lingered in the deep woods. It gained a veneer of historical credibility through alleged encounters with prominent figures, including former King of Spain Joseph Bonaparte and Commodore Stephen Decatur, who supposedly test-fired a cannon at the flying beast. Through generations of oral storytelling in a deeply isolated region, the creature firmly embedded itself into the cultural subconscious of southern New Jersey. Genealogists checking colonial records found that underneath the folklore, a real Leeds family actually lived in those woods, and the true origin of the story traces back to their patriarch, Daniel Leeds. Daniel Leeds was an almanac publisher in the early 1700s. His regional success put him in direct, hostile competition with Benjamin Franklin. Franklin weaponized his own publication to destroy his rival's reputation. Because Leeds occasionally included astrological charts in his almanacs, Franklin attacked him in print, branding the entire Leeds family as ungodly and aligned with the occult. The final piece of the mythology came from the Leeds family crust itself, which featured a wyvern, a winged, two-legged, dragon-like creature. The Leeds devil originated as a calculated political smear that, repeated over decades in an isolated region, eventually warped into a literal monster living in the woods. By the winter of 1909, this deeply ingrained folklore meant the population of the Delaware Valley was already psychologically primed to see a monster. The biological trigger for the panic likely came from the sky above them. Ornithologists point to the unexpected arrival of large, non-native migratory wading birds, specifically the sandhill crane. In poor lighting or thick fog, a massive bird with a wide wingspan and trailing legs visually matches the exact profile of the mythical beast. Compounding the misidentifications was an aggressively competitive local press. It was the era of yellow journalism, and newspapers were financially incentivized to heavily embellish ordinary sightings to sell copies. This created a feedback loop of collective hysteria. Once a population becomes terrified that a threat is loose, fear becomes the lens through which every shadow, unfamiliar animal track, or distant sound is interpreted as undeniable proof. The 1909 shutdown resulted from a disastrous collision. Unfamiliar wildlife, predatory journalism, and mass psychology combined to create a public emergency out of thin air. Just as quickly as it began, the panic vanished. By the following week, the sightings ceased entirely, and the Philadelphia Zoo's $10,000 reward went uncollected. Yet, instead of fading into obscurity, the legend adapted. The state of New Jersey fully embraced its mythical resident, eventually elevating the creature into a beloved commercial mascot and a National Hockey League sports franchise. But the environment that birthed the myth remains. Despite a century of urbanization surrounding it, the Pine Barrens still contain over 1 million acres of incredibly dense, isolating wilderness. Because that geography is still largely unmapped by ordinary people, quiet but genuine sighting reports continue to surface from hunters and hikers straight through to today. As long as humanity desires mystery in the dark woods, America's oldest unsolved legend will never truly disappear.